Are we live? Okay. Alrighty. Hi everyone, I'm Angel Jackson. I'm a part of the Harris County Youth Collective today, and this is a webinar about knowing your rights as a dual status youth or youth in foster care. And then we have one of my favorites here. I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
I'm Dustin Rynders with Disability Rights Texas, and I'm a supervising attorney here.
All right, so now we have some 100% information from him that we're going to be giving to you all. So the whole purpose of this live is to inform the community about rights for dual status youth, and to inform you all what dual status youth are and how we classify them, and just to give some information that's needed and to break some stereotypes that that's known for foster youth. So one of the first questions I want to ask you is, what is a dual status youth?
So a dual status youth it really refers to the fact that the youth are involved in two systems, and so usually that's someone who's in foster care and the juvenile justice system, and so kind of being involved in both systems means that they're kind of dually involved.
Okay, so once you're in the system, what are some questions that should be asked, once you originally become a dual status youth? Because are you do you have an attorney, or how does the process work?
So the path to becoming a dual status youth, there are different paths to it. So you could be a youth who's already in foster care who picks up a charge, and so that's kind of the moment you become a dual status youth.
Okay.
Or you could be someone who may enter the foster care system after you already have a charge of some sort. And so really you're going to get an attorney appointed to you not because you're dual status, but because of your involvement in one of those other systems. And at different points, you might even have more than one attorney. You may have an attorney in both systems. The reason it's important that we start talking about the needs of kids who are in both systems is that in history, a lot of times people weren't talking to each other. So maybe you even had two attorneys, one in the juvenile justice system and one in the foster care system. Maybe they talked to each other, maybe they didn't. Maybe the caseworker and the probation officer were talking to each other, maybe they weren't.
Okay.
And a lot of times, people in one system only understand their system really well. They may not know that other system, and so their lack of understanding of that other system can really hurt the kid. It can be that they end up staying in the detention center because no one's looking for them a place to live, and a lot of times it's just miscommunication. But we're doing a lot of exciting work in Harris County now to improve that and make it better. When children go into foster care, they all get an attorney ad litem appointed in their case.
Okay, so I was going to ask you that.
They all get an attorney, but they may not keep their attorney forever.
Yeah.
So in the initial months of being in foster care, all children have an attorney.
So what are your rights, as being a foster youth? When you first come into foster care, something that I was looking up is that that your parent and your caseworker have a plan, and that they're supposed to express that plan to you, which I never got a plan, express.
I didn't print it out, but there's actually a foster care bill of rights that people can look up on fosteryouthjustice.org, which is a website run by TRALA, Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid. But the Bill of Rights covers a lot of things. I mean, you're supposed to get clothes similar to what other people wear. You're not supposed to have to wear something that identifies you as a youth in foster care, or that makes you stand out in your community. You're supposed to be treated fairly. You're supposed to be free of abuse and neglect. You're supposed to have reasonable contact with, your family members and other important people in your life. And you're supposed to get to go to school and be treated fairly in school.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of rights.
Okay, so what are some things that we should ask our caseworkers, being a foster youth, before we go into being a dual status youth?
So I think, when a youth's in care, they need to the best of their ability, make their needs known to their caseworker, whatever they are.
Okay.
And, every youth, that's going to be something different. I mean, it may be a youth who the main thing they need at that time is more communication with their sibling who they don't get to see very often.
Okay.
There may be someone else who needs to speak up and talk about being mistreated. In Texas, we live in a state where our entire foster care system now is under court order because of rampant abuse and neglect in some residential treatment centers, because of the ineffective investigations that were done into claims of abuse for kids who are already in the system. for places not even making confidential communication available to kids who are in the system so that they have a means of a private phone line to call and say, hey, my foster parents mistreating me. So I think some of the things that we need to happen, and hopefully some of this will happen with this really important lawsuit that Children's Rights is bringing, is that, we need to make sure that at a minimum, if a child is removed from their home because of abuse and neglect, that they're not subjected to more abuse in our system.
Okay. That makes perfect sense, because sometimes that happens when you're in foster care. You're put into a situation where you're just more uncomfortable than you would be at home, just because everything happens so fast. So I was asking you about, what type of questions to ask your caseworker? Because a lot of times I remember when I first entered care that I didn't have I didn't ask them any questions, because for one, I was 14 and I didn't really know what to ask them. And I was told from some information that I was looking up is that they're supposed to tell you why you're into care. Like a lot of times they don't express that. They're just like, oh, we're taking you away just because your parents did this. Like they don't really give you a definite reason why. What should we do to change that?
I think part of it's asking the question, and I think that sometimes people aren't given all the information because there's a feeling that they may not be developmentally ready to hear all the information. And there's probably some truth to the fact that as we get older, we're able to receive more and more information, maybe about specifics. There are also some people who want more specifics than others. Some of us are just a little more curious than others. Some of us, hearing some of the details might be kind of traumatizing or re-traumatizing. I think sometimes caseworkers or counselors are trying to navigate what's the right amount of information to share. But another thing that happens, the person that youth may have been asking may not even know.
Yeah, very true.
Because the truth is, we have a lot of turnover in our system, and you end up with a file being transferred to you, and you may be new on the case, and that doesn't mean you've read all 5 boxes.
So, as a youth, are you able to access your personal records? So
you do, as an adult, have the right to request your entire file.
So it has to be once you're 18 years old.
Once you turn 18, you can ask for your entire file. And it takes a while to get it, but you can find, again, on that Foster Youth Justice website, you can find the information on how to make that request. It takes a while to get it, and then I've known some people who do the work to get it, and then they let it sit for a minute, decided, do I want to go through it? And then other people who, of course, were really anxious.
I've requested the paper for my files, but I've never went through with it to even look at it, because I'm what good would that do? What would it really what? Because I know exactly what I went through in foster care and all the foster homes that I was in. So I'm what good would my file do for me right now? It was just to have it. But yeah,
for some people, and it all depends on your circumstance. I represent a lot of children with disabilities, and that is really broad. I mean, it could be anything from a learning disability to a mental health condition. Some of them are eligible for services in the adult system based on things that happened as children. So, for example, if maybe they got accommodations in school, well, when they enter college, they may still need extra time on a test or, to be given the test in a small setting. They can get that kind of stuff, but you're going to need a record of having received it before. So sometimes records are important because they show what you need. Sometimes records can be important to be eligible for something. So, we have too many kids who age out of foster care who are homeless or who are housing, unstable. And so some percentage of those people may want to ask for things like Social Security disability. So even if they don't have full buy-in to, every diagnosis they were ever given, a long history of receiving a lot of diagnosis and having a lot of struggles, that could build a case for Social Security disability, which might be the ticket for that child to young adult to continue to get health care through Medicaid and to at least have some basic income to protect from homelessness, even though for most people the goal is not to do that long term. It's to work and be independent.
Yeah, but if you're unaware that you have a disability, what are the steps you can take, being a dual status youth or foster youth, in order to identify that?
So one thing is that children in foster care are assessed more than anybody else.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a lot of psychological assessments in a file that are going to list diagnoses. And, for some people, it's a process to figure out kind of what you believe is true about you, right? Because there are certainly people who go through the foster care system who showed all of these signs that were labeled as disabilities, but they may not think that really defines them. They may not think that really applies to them. But then, of course, there are a lot of other people who, that is a part of them. And sometimes we just have too much stigma around mental health. So if they start to recognize, maybe I do have some inattention problems, maybe I do need some accommodations, maybe I do benefit from medication, but they can look in their files and see what they've been diagnosed in their psychological.
Okay, so if you feel like you've been misdiagnosed, like let's say I've been diagnosed to have ADHD, or I feel like I'm slight dyslexic because I've noticed something about me as an adult. I like switch numbers and switch letters around and stuff like that. So, but I don't know, being in foster youth, how I could say, hey, I feel like I'm not.
So one of the things that's tough about dyslexia is that dyslexia is not a mental health condition, it's just a learning difference.
Okay.
And Medicaid doesn't usually pay for learning disability testing.
Okay.
So foster youth are assessed all of the time for psychological conditions, but a true assessment of a learning disability, which could unleash a whole bunch of services to make reading instruction easier for someone, really is done at the school level.
Okay.
And in Texas, we had a several-year investigation that I was a part of that now the entire state of Texas is under federal oversight by the Department of Education because the Texas Education Agency was capping the number of kids who could receive disability-related services and excluding most children with dyslexia from receiving the services they needed at school. And so I think schools are doing a little better now. We're on the upswing and trying to improve that. Okay. But a lot of kids weren't identified. And foster kids are easy to miss for learning disability too. Because if you're in foster care and you're moving a lot.
Exactly. Yeah.
When you move, even if you're really behind in reading or whatever it is, it's easy for the school to say, well, I'm not so sure that we need to evaluate for a learning disability because Angel's moved so much, it's probably just that she's moved. Yeah. And that may be true. I mean, a foster youth may be behind in school only because they've moved. Or they could be behind also because they have a learning disability. Okay. And you have to...
I feel like it affects me more in math because I love reading. I enjoy reading. I did well in school with reading, so I feel like that affected me more. But I don't feel like I said anything about it because I didn't know how. So thank you for that. That's good information. So also, I wanted to know, being a dual status youth and when you're identified, does it affect your ability to have a placement or to even receive benefits?
So, on placement, usually placement is within the foster care system. And so someone's juvenile justice background, unfortunately, can make it more challenging for the DFPS or CPS foster care system to find them a place to stay. If, say, the person's leaving detention, there may be fewer placements that are willing to offer them placements. But it's also true that is something that CPS is legally required to provide. So they have taken on the responsibility for parenting every child in their system. In most cases, the family didn't ask them to get involved. They raised their hand and said, we think we could be a better parent than this other person. And so it is their responsibility to find a placement. And so, I also think we can't let people off too easy. I mean, it is true that there aren't a lot of placements offering for that special population. And at the same time, it's our responsibility as a community to make sure that they exist, that we get the word out there about need. There are people who have a passion for every different subgroup of youth. And so it's about making sure that the state and that our county makes investments in building what our community needs to support this special group of kids.
Okay. So before like the youth becomes a foster youth or a dual status youth, what's the process? Like if there's a case called you of like someone says, hey, well, we feel like someone wrote a report on you and said you're neglecting your child. Like, what's the right as a parent? Like when the CPS knocks on your door, do you have to let them in your home? Like, what's the steps?
There is a Texas Legal Service hotline, and I don't have the number on me now, but Texas Legal Services runs a hotline just for parents to give them their rights in going through CPS, which is a really important service that they provide. Parents want to cooperate within reason with an investigator. It raises suspicion to not cooperate with an investigator. The other thing is, as a parent, is if there is a sign that your child's being abused, it may not be you, but it doesn't mean that no one's abusing your child. And so the other thing is, I think for most of us as a parent, if there were some sign that our child's being abused, I want a qualified person to try to help me figure out if that's happening, because it could be happening somewhere else. And so you also, you want it to be investigated. At the same time, the reality is the system doesn't always work like it's supposed to. There's a lot of bias in the system. There's a lot of research that says that even with very similar situations, that we find more negative narratives written about investigations in African American homes than in white homes. Here in Harris County, where we live, we have a drastic overrepresentation of Black youth in foster care. And not only more Black youth who are coming into foster care, but they're staying longer, meaning that they're less likely to return home or to be adopted while in care. And, my belief is that the research is pretty clear that African American families are no more likely to abuse their kids. So the overrepresentation of children in the system speaks to other injustices that are out there. So are we just a little more critical of those families when the investigators go in? Are the courts a little more critical? Do we provide less help to the parents to stabilize? I think the answer is, like, in some cases, all of that, right? I mean, there's all sorts of things that affect those injustices. And so I think parents are smart to learn about their rights and to be cautious. I don't think you want to come off as defensive, but I do think that you want to be cautious. And so if you're afraid that you're not really trusting of someone being in your home, that person may get a subpoena and be able to come into your home or have law enforcement. But at least talk to them.
So, like,
at least have a conversation, or step outside and have a conversation.
Entered your home, are you like allowed to record? Because people love to record situations that's going on now.
I don't see any reason that you wouldn't be able to record.
So, like, what if?
Because the thing about an investigation is that whoever called in,
and most of the time they don't tell you.
Whoever called in, that is confidential. So. And it's confidential if you needed to do it too. And calls go in for all sorts of reasons. So, there are people who make spiteful calls because they're upset with their ex or their neighbor. There are people who are just being very cautious. And there are people who really are worried about kids who call in. All of that happens, right? And so not every call results in a visit. So, like, if you're just like discipline your child, sometimes, because my son's 4, so I have like I have to discipline him because he's a boy, and I feel like sometimes I can when we're out in public, I can feel like, because I was in foster care, so I'm always cautious of other people looking around and being aware of exactly what's going on. And I feel like, as a parent, do I still, like, have the right to discipline him and, like, in any way that I feel? Because some people are like, you shouldn't be, doing that to that baby, or, don't yell at your baby or whatever. So you don't have the right to do it any way you feel.
I understand.
I don't know what you're like. So,
even like a small little pop or something, people are like,
Texas is clear that corporal punishment or spanking is allowed.
Okay.
But it's a slippery slope.
So are foster parents allowed to discipline a youth? That's in the home?
Foster parents are not allowed to use corporal punishment. But I'll tell you, I'm gonna challenge you a little bit here.
Okay.
The research is really clear that spanking is the least effective form of discipline. Mm-hmm. It is not effective. There is research for decades to show.
Tell that to black people. Tell that to black mamas and grandmas.
And there are, and sometimes, perceptions that people have, and research have some space between them. But let's look at outcomes, right? Mm-hmm. So if we were to say that that in the African American community spanking is more common, but I don't even know if that's true.
But it is.
You think it's true? Yeah. Maybe it is. I mean, there are white people who spank their kids too. Yeah. Not me. I don't spank my kids. but anyhow, even if that were more common, well, we have over-discipline of African American youth in schools. We have over-criminal justice referral. Mm-hmm. I mean, are we accomplishing what we're wanting to with that spanking?
I mean,
is that is it helping? Because in one important check that I try to tell myself in discipline, and I am not putting myself out as a role model because I fall short as a parent like everybody else, but it's important to never discipline your child out of anger. Mm-hmm. So where corporal punishment, it's very clear that in Texas that someone's legally allowed to spank their kid. It's probably not a good idea, honestly. Okay. But you're legal. I mean, it's not illegal. But what we see is when people start spanking, and instead of it being about disciplining the kid, it's about them burning off steam. Mm-hmm. Well, then all of a sudden that spanking becomes abuse.
Okay.
And, and it gets weird. And it, it's one thing a pop for a very young child, but, we still allow corporal punishment in some Texas schools, which I find ridiculous. Yes.
Yeah.
And we've had cases with teenagers come in and the principal is leaving marks on that child, and I think at some point that just says more about the principal than it does the kid. Mm-hmm. No form of discipline should be a way for an adult to vent their anger or frustration. Mm-hmm. And raising kids can be frustrating, but it's upon the parent to learn better skills and
redirection
and a lot of it's for them, right? It's a lot of it's about checking my frustration, calming myself down when the kid gets the best of me. And you know what? That kid is going to learn more from how my mom or dad reacts to being frustrated than they're going to learn from anything you say or anything you do hitting them. So if they learn that when you're frustrated you hit someone, well then guess what? What the research suggests that children who are spanked are more likely to participate in physical aggression and fighting. Mm-hmm. And that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
If you're frustrated with someone and you hit them, that's not a good lesson. Right?
Yeah.
So that's my challenge for you. But yes, it's legal to spank people,
so,
but I'm never going to recommend it.
Well, I'm just asking because of part of the rights, being in foster care is, they can't discipline you, and I think that...
They can't spank you. They can discipline.
Okay.
But so what other forms of discipline besides spanking? Because you seem to think...
Well, listen, no, because I don't spank my son a lot. Like, if I do, I'm like a tap on the hand if he does, like, something dangerous.
Yeah.
But my family feels like I doesn't spank him enough. And to me, because I've got whoopings all my life. And I'm like, that didn't really do anything to me, but made me angry. So when I see an anger strike in him, and I notice if I do pop him, he just, like... Those
you're like, we're not going to get you in.
Yeah.
So here's the thing: there are other. With my son, his biggest motivator in life is time on the iPad or time with technology or time. So for him, he loses. Take it away.
Yeah.
And so he knows if any day at school he gets in trouble with his teacher or I get a bad note home, there's no technology over the whole week.
Yeah.
The rest of the week, you've lost technology for a week. So that's in our house. Now, every kid's going to be different, but there's a lot of ways to discipline a kid. But the other thing is, not only are there other ways to discipline, but what all the behavior researchers would tell us, and I'm not a behavior researcher, I'm just a lawyer who works with behavior researchers a lot, but what they would all tell us is no form of discipline or consequence or punishment is as effective as positive reinforcement.
Okay.
So kids hear no from us probably 10 more times than they hear good job, good job. Now, when you tell someone, hey, are you sure to tell your kid when they do things right? every parent says, well, like, yeah. But what the researchers find is if you record a lot of parents,
they don't
do it
as much.
You say an occasional good job, but if you're a kid and you hear no or stop that constantly, and you hear good job once in a blue moon, what do you remember? Well, I never do anything right. And you start to feel negative and bad about yourself. If parents spend more time focusing on praising and making a big deal out of all the good stuff, they will get a lot further, according to the research, than by focusing on how we punish all the bad stuff. So the whole focus around the consequences and how we did it, I mean, it's fine to have consequences. You should have consequences. But all the focus on what that looks like misses the bigger point that we need to spend a whole lot more time on positive affirmations for the kids when they do something right.
True. Very true.
It's harder to do.
It is.
Because it's real frustrating when they act up.
Yeah. It is. Because I've noticed my son is just growing and doing things differently, but I'm trying to like be more positive and calm down, you know. And my sister's like, you should do something, and I'm like, he's 4. I'm gonna let him grow out of it. So another question is like, do you feel like that youth that are in foster care are being their consequences are more severe than youth that are not?
Yeah, it's interesting. In some ways, yes. So, I mean, one thing that you experience in foster care is that you act up. A foster placement may give a notice on you, and you're just constantly bounced from place to place. It's pretty rare when you're living with your own family. It happens. I mean, you know, some kids enter foster care because their parents place them in foster care because they can't, you know, they can't handle them. But it's more common for biological parents to work through the difficult times with foster kids. With their own children than it is for foster parents with foster kids. Part of the reason is that for many years our system was based on these levels of care, which basically you get paid more for a kid who acts up, so you have an incentive to describe the kid negatively. But also, if a kid's level gets too high, well, maybe you're not even licensed for that level, so they naturally move. And I think that's one of the biggest injustices for kids, I think, in the system, because people deserve stability. And you see a testing of boundaries. Everyone wants to know, does this person really love me? Does this person really care about me? Are they going to stick by me? It's one thing to say I care, but if I act up a little and you immediately give up on me, you've kind of shown me something else with your actions. And I think that's probably the biggest harm for foster kids. Now, to be more specific, in the juvenile justice system, one thing that's tough is, for many years in Texas, kids were always sent to justice of the peace courts for these minor misdemeanors for things, and it still happens for things like a basic fight at school, or it used to even be truancy. And what we saw for years is those had fines, and what you see is a lot of parents would pay for the tickets for their kids, but I didn't see a lot of foster parents paying for tickets for those kids. And so there are some injustices in that kind of way. And then, if you're in the actual juvenile justice system, well, you're going to be appointed an attorney, and you're not having to pay fines, but you might be more likely to sit in detention for longer. Because if I'm a kid who's living with my biological family and the judge is deciding, do I get to leave detention and go home today or do I not? The parents are going to be asked, well, will you take him home and will you supervise him, right? And if the parents say yes, then more times than not, the kid gets to go home. Depends on what they did, but say it's kind of a run-of-the-mill charge, then they're going to get to go home. But, if you're a child in foster care and the question is, are you ready to leave detention? It gets more complicated.
Yeah, because they have to have a placement for
you. Probably already lost your last placement.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly
and they have to look for a placement for you. And that also means that people have to figure out when to request the placement from CPS. And that's where that issue of the probation system and the foster care system really talking to each other and coordinating becomes so important. And that's why I'm so excited about the work that Harris County Youth Collective is doing to improve on that here in Harris County. And some important changes have already been made.
So, what are your rights as a youth when you're charged with a crime? Yeah,
so you are entitled to an attorney. you're entitled to an attorney. You're entitled to enter a plea. You don't have to testify against yourself. You can remain silent if you choose. So those are all some of the big basic rights.
Yeah, so are they supposed to like read you your Miranda rights when you're a youth?
So you're supposed to get read Miranda rights when you are detained, but then the question is really, when is that?
Yeah,
and there's
because
a lot
most
of cases
of the times
there.
that youth being arrested is at school. So I don't even think that comes, because I was arrested as a youth at 14 at school. I don't remember that happening. Well, baby, because...
And one of the tough things is there's some bad case law that I don't agree with. It suggests that, if it's a principal who asks you what you did and pulls you aside somewhere, then they don't have to read you any rights, but they can still share everything you said with the officer who may be in the office next door. And that doesn't feel right to me, So there are... I think for our purposes, it makes it important to teach people about their rights, to teach people to be cautious. And it's really unfortunate because, sadly, it actually interferes in what we were talking about earlier. We were talking about parenting and discipline and about how the ways we want to teach our kids to be responsible and act right. And as a parent, one thing we all want to teach our kids is to take responsibility for their actions. So the hard part about that is part of taking responsibility for your actions is speaking the truth. And yet, if a child as young as 10 in a Texas public school admits to something stupid they did, currently it can be used against them in a juvenile justice system, and we have just a horrible problem with an over-referral of minor misconduct in schools to a juvenile justice system where kids don't need to be and they don't benefit from involvement with usually. And so, sadly, I feel like the broken systems are forcing parents to kind of do the opposite of what they want to as parents, and to have to actually warn kids, especially when kids are 10 and over, hey, be careful. The principal calls you in and asks if you did something. Maybe call me before you talk to him.
Yeah.
And I would hate to tell, my son's not quite 10 yet, so I got some years to work that out. I don't want to tell my kid not to answer questions for a principal, but I think at 10 or over, the consequences can just be so serious if juvenile justice is involved. And so for that reason, I think that, we have to educate youth to be cautious.
Exactly. Yeah, we do. Which is scary. They have to start doing it so young, but I mean, it is what it is. So like once you're identified as a dual status youth, once you're into care and you're into the juvenile justice system. So what are some like preparations that youth can make? Well, okay. So once you're charged with the charge, right? And you complete whatever it is successfully, maybe you're
your
in
probation.
Your probation, you're in a detention center or whatever. What's the steps after that?
Yeah, so it's good to get a consultation on clearing your charges at some point. So there are resources if you're here in Harris County, the Earl Carl Institute at TSU, JCAP at the University of Houston Law School. The Houston Bar Association has a program that does expunging and sealing work. And so it's important to meet with a lawyer who does that and get kind of a consultation on your record. So it does depend on what you were charged with and when and how long it's been. But many charges can be sealed or expunged, and it gets really complicated. So, there is restricted access where automatically, if it was just a juvenile charge, some people shouldn't be able to see what's there. But what we find is sometimes that doesn't work really well. And then we also find that law enforcement's always going to see it unless it's fully expunged. And so that means that, sadly, you have to know that if you have some background and it hasn't been fully expunged, then anytime you have interactions with the police, they're going to be more suspicious of you. They're going to be more likely to search your car. You got to live extra clean.
So, like, once you do that, when you're charged with a crime, does it affect your ability, when you're in foster care, to receive any of the benefits of it? Like PALS, and
So
ETV?
most of the benefits it doesn't affect. You can still get the tuition waiver or an ETV, but if you want to be in an extended foster care where you're in paid placement, if you commit a higher level adult felony type offense, that can be a reason that you're not eligible for extended foster care. And in theory, I think it's because they feel like they wouldn't be able to find you a placement. So there are circumstances that it can impact some benefits.
Okay. Yeah, because PALS, the preparation for adult living, is, I think it's severe in order for you to like transition into adulthood. Because most of the time when you catch a charge as a juvenile, it's maybe like 14, 15, around there, and PALS starts at like 16. So usually, like when you're in a placement, you go and you meet for like once a Saturday for like maybe like 6 weeks or something like that. So
you learn about budgeting, or healthcare, or whatever it is. Yeah.
And my situation was unique because I decided I don't recommend this to anybody, but I left one of my placements, and because I was determined, I got a job, and I was gonna get emancipated, but I was like, well, I'm like 16, about to be 17. I feel like I don't really need to, and because I wasn't as stable as I'm sure the courts would have liked, because I was living with a friend. I did have a job, but I think you have to have like your own apartment, a job.
You're supposed to be independent for 6 months.
Yeah. So okay. So I didn't even really know. I just like heard the word emancipation, and I'm like, yeah, I want to do this. So like I ran away from one of my placements, but I still was able to receive PALS. Because I was working, and I contacted my PAL worker like, hey, I'm trying to do things on my own, but I still want to be able to like go to class and stuff like that. I think I can make it. And she gave me like this super huge like packet that I completed. So I was like learning things on my own, how to fill out applications and open up a bank account, and I think it made me stronger to like learn stuff as I go, as opposed to just like sitting, and then like life experience is the best anyway that you can get to just like make yourself self-sufficient, I think. So one of the things that I wanted to inform like the community on for foster youth is the benefits that you can get after you exit out of care, or you're in the process of exiting out of care, because once you're a dual status youth, those benefits are like essential to survive. And like you were saying about if you have disabilities, having an SSI in order for you to sustain a living is important. So ETV is not something that's talked about a lot, and I forgot like what the whole word means.
Education training voucher?
Yeah, maybe. Okay. So he knows. So that's important. And I had no knowledge of that until I like contacted my PAL work, and I think her name was Josetta Williams, and she was so awesome. I don't think she's with CPS anymore, but she's like, girl, because I got my GED at what is that, HCC. I was 17, and don't feel ashamed to get a GED. And I took the math test like 3 times. So I was telling you, I feel like I'm dyslexic because it took me 3 times to pass the math. But I was like not gonna give up because I wanted some type of completion of my high school education.
I think you just undervalued when you said, "Hey, don't be hard on yourself for getting a GED."
No,
but here's what I want to tell most people:
most
people aren't going to pass it like Angel. The truth is, most people struggle. If you've had inconsistent schooling, if you have any kind of disability, the GED people may look down on, but the truth is, it's gotten real hard.
Yeah.
Some people might say it's harder to get through a GED now than to just make it through regular high school. And so what I always tell people is, don't look down at a GED. But the other thing is, if you have any chance of getting your regular degree, don't just assume that you're going to go off and be Angel and pass the GED, because that doesn't happen for most people. Most people really struggle to get through the GED.
Yeah, but I went through like GED classes, like where you go like 2-3 times a week. I had the book. I was determined, and I think that's what a lot of people lack is like determination in order for you to be successful, because it's not easy. Like being in a regular home, going through school is not easy, and then when you get into an environment where you don't know anyone and everything's completely new, and you're like feeling like an outcast, being in foster care, you need determination and like self-confidence the most. And what you were saying about redirection and like discipline, I don't feel like I got that. Like, hey, good job for like doing the simplest things. Ooh, you made a pie today, or whatever. It's like
you're doing a good job now.
I tell myself that now. Like I really write affirmations on my mirror. Like I put them. I learned this from being Mary Jane. I don't know if you ever watched the show, but I love her. she's like plays a character where she's she's a talk show host, or she's a journalist. That's the better word for it. She's a journalist, and she writes affirmations and stuff, and she puts them all over her wall. And I feel like she felt weird for that, but to me, that's like genius. And you see it every day because you look at yourself in the mirror. And I don't know if you tell yourself negative or positive things, but I try to tell myself positive things each day. If I feel like, oh, I'm looking like crap today, but I'm like, no, girl, you still a baddie. So, I still have to try to be positive in any, way. So that's important for me. So ETV is the tuition is what you said, education.
So you can have the tuition waiver at state schools in Texas, which is an awesome benefit.
Yes.
So you can use that at community college, 4-year schools. You can use it to become a doctor.
But you don't receive that unless you go through the PALS training.
You have to go through the training. The other thing is the education and training voucher can be used in combination with the tuition waiver.
And this is like a great thing to take advantage of. So you can apply
for that to get your laptop, help pay for books, other expenses you have.
So they give you like $5,000 a year for you split it up between 2 semesters. It's $2,500, and you make a budget plan and anything that you need. I think they pay for like your phone bill. They help you put money towards your apartment.
And the other thing is if you want to do like vocational training that the community college near you may not offer.
Okay.
So I've seen you could use your ETV for like a private program. So say that you found an inexpensive cosmetology program, and you want to do cosmetology, but the community college near you doesn't offer cosmetology, and you found another one. You could use your ETV to do the cosmetology at the private program too.
Okay.
So that's another way that I've seen people use it. Probably, I hate to go back to the homelessness because it's such a downer, but I think another really important benefit is the ability to go back into care.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because when you're at 17 and your pal worker's asking you at your circle of support, are you going to stay in care? Many people are thinking, hell no.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I am done. I am sick of this.
Yeah.
And I always hope that things work out the way they think. So I've known people who they felt like they had a plan. They were going to go stay with their family who maybe they haven't actually tried staying with in quite a long time.
With my family.
Maybe they didn't have kind of a good picture of what that might be like. And so sometimes I've seen young people who, it's their right at 18 to go try that out. No one can tell them no anymore, right? So if the parents want them or their aunt wants them or whatever, they can go there. No one has to approve it. But, I'll be honest, I've had people who said they weren't going to go into extended care, and they went to family, and within 2 days, they're like, this isn't it. And so when that happens, it is important to know that you can put in a request to return to care.
Okay.
So if you're in that transition age youth, those first few years right out after you turn 18, and you really fall on hard times, you really are on the street, and you want to go to care, there's nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
And that doesn't, when you enter back in, it doesn't mean you're committing to stay for any particular amount of time.
Can you stay in extended
care? I need
care?
to look it up again. I want to say that it's 21. It's several years from 18.
And you can still receive all of the benefits.
So you can. So the thing is, you still have to be in school or working or something. You can't. You don't get to just play video games or whatever at a foster parent's house.
Yeah.
But you can go back into care while you're finishing school. So, maybe you had a year left in high school and you just want to stay in care to get that out of your way. Or maybe it's to start working and building up money until you can get your own place. But that's another potential benefit is the ability
for extended care.
For extended care.
Yeah.
And
I don't think they gave me that option. They was like, girl, we know you're just ready to go. I'm like, bye. I don't want to see y'all no more. I'm going to try to do the best that I can and being sufficient as an adult. And it's not hard.
And everyone's situation is different. I mean, everyone has different. Some families are able to take the person back, and it goes great. But that's unfortunately, it's not everyone's situation.
Okay, so my last question is why is this topic so important for the community?
I think it's important to I always think of a community is as healthy as its most vulnerable citizens, right? And when we talk about a minor, a young person, a child who's already involved in foster care, which means that they've already been a survivor of abuse or neglect, that even if what had happened to them, maybe they don't feel was as serious as what happened to other people, they've been removed from their family. That alone is so traumatic. and then that person then gets put in the juvenile justice system and all the challenges that entails. Maybe they did something really serious that landed them there, but they're still a young person who, is a child of the state. It's the state's responsibility to raise them at this point. And so I think these are really vulnerable children who deserve kind of all the resources that as a community we can surround them with, to help them be successful. And I think when you take care of even those most vulnerable children, that's a sign that you have a healthy community for everyone.
Okay. That makes perfect sense. And why the topic is so necessary for me is because I'm a dual status youth. I'm 26 now, so I'm not that young, but I'm still in there. But I think it's important for us to continue to reach back into our community and let the youth know that no matter what you're going through, you're gonna prevail through your situation with persistence and to have courage in your situation, and to believe in yourself, and to know that life gets easier eventually, and that you're loved, and we care about you. We want to see you succeed in every aspect of your life, and we want to give you the necessary information for you to have your rights, and the information for you as you're exiting out of care into being an adult, and just to be successful. So I hope that you all enjoyed our conversation. And Dustin, I love him, and I appreciate you for being a vessel of information for us. And we just hope that you learned something from our community or whatever, and learn more about dual status youth, because we'll continue to have this conversation. And we just thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you, Angel,
so
for having me.
No problem. Thank you.
Did anyone listen?
Yeah.
He and I have